Today I'd like to talk to you about the different stages of your life and how that relates to your wealth creation. So the first one would be when you enter the workforce for the first time and you actually start getting paid for the things that you're doing. One thing to remember at that point is to get your superannuation paid and to make sure that you only have one superannuation fund rather than multiple funds. In that one super fund, you want to make doubly sure that you have your investments situated in a high growth investment option. And that's because your investment time frame when you first start working is really very long. In many cases, you have over 40 years until you can access your superannuation. The last point with that is that you really need to start your good savings habits as soon as possible. So that means regardless of how much you're earning or how little you're earning, you need to be working hard and intentionally putting some money aside every time you get paid. The next stage of your wealth creation journey is in relation to getting married or perhaps entering into a long-term relationship. So a really important point here is to actually discuss your financial goals with your partner and what this looks like for you, and particularly what's actually important for each of you. So it might be that you both like going on holidays, and in that then you're able to set a particular savings plan that will work for you to get an outcome that you're both looking for. Another consideration is that you keep things as transparent as possible. So that means being really open and clear about what debt each person has, what assets each person has, what their superannuation is, and also what they're earning. This transparency just allows you to be really clear and then also set some joint goals with what you're trying to achieve. It's also important to remember to update your superannuation beneficiary nomination at this time, because you might actually have your parents in there or someone else who you would want that money to go to. If you've got married, it might be worth putting your spouse now in as that beneficiary, and at the same time digging out your will, if you have one, and putting a new will in place together. Now, when you have kids, it's important to consider the possible changes to income if one person's going to be working less. Now, this can be reduced somewhat if there's paid parental leave and so on, but it's most likely that your overall income is going to change. It's also a good time to get the grandparents involved and for them to put a little bit of money aside for their grandkids over the longer term. And the benefit of them doing this is that the grandkids actually have quite a long investment time frame. So you never know, it might be the case that what the grandparents have built up over 18 years or 25 years actually ends up being equivalent to a house deposit or something towards that for their grandchildren. The last point is that it's really important to teach your kids that there is some kind of limit to finances and also to associate work with payment. It's vitally important that kids get that message early. Now we'll talk about growing your wealth. And the key to getting ahead is to spend less than what you earn and to do something constructive with what's left over, and then try to repeat that process every year. We'd also say do a budget and try to find out if there's any surplus in what you're actually earning, because then you can find out how you'll best spend that and intentionally take that money out of circulation. So what you can pull out of your budget should then be invested in something that is growing and also something that you can gradually add to over time. Now, paying down your debt will also improve your net asset position. So your net asset position is the difference between your overall asset base and any debt that you have associated with it. And it's that net asset position that you'd like to see growing every year, and is probably the most important thing. So the main message is to be intentional and to be consistent with what you're trying to do, and most importantly, to make a start. Now let's talk about retiring and what this actually means. So the discussion around retirement has really changed quite a lot, and I would say it's changed probably in the last 10 years. So previously the conversation was around people wanting to retire at 55. Now people are getting to 65 and saying that they actually want to keep working, but more particularly they want to keep working on their terms. So this might mean that they're working part-time as opposed to full-time. An important thing to do is to think about what you actually want your retirement to look like and what this means for you, because you do actually get a say in this. So for some people it might mean that you want to go travelling every year. For others it might mean that you want to be a bit closer to the grandkids. But it's important to actually articulate those things and then put some plans in place around what you're actually wanting. Further to that, we'd suggest you then give very clear consideration to what this will actually cost you, and what retirement costs will depend on each particular person. Then you need to consider where your money is actually sitting. So ideally you want the bulk of your investable asset base sitting in a low tax environment by this stage. Now ideally for most people, that's superannuation. So some planning needs to go into place before retirement to try to shift assets over into super just for that tax benefit of doing so. The main risk that people will face in retirement is they actually outlive their money. But you do get some say again in this, and you can map out the likelihood of this actually occurring, taking into account your asset position now and perhaps what your likely life expectancy will be, and also what income you're wanting to draw from your investments along the way. So really your options are to work longer, spend less, or take on more risk with your investing. And those things can, in many cases, extend the lifetime of your asset base in retirement. Another concept to get clear on is the idea of gradually drawing down your capital over time and understanding that this is actually okay if it allows you to do what you're wanting to do in your retirement years. So it might be the case that you start with $1 million at age 70 and you don't quite end up with $1 million by the time you're 90. It is an important concept for people to get clear on.